So I want us to take a moment and define what is plagiarism. I have several examples here, and you're going to see a student's paper versus the actual source, and you can use this to help teach your students what would and would not be considered plagiarism. And you can pause this video, you can show this to them, and you can ask them, is this or is this not plagiarism, and why? And some of these might surprise your students. At least that's the intent. All right, so number one, is this plagiarism? You'll see the original over to the left, as well as the student's paper. And this one's pretty easy, right? Both of them are the exact same. And so when students think of plagiarism, I think that this is what comes to mind. They think that the only way to plagiarize is if they take something word for word from a source, multiple sentences, and they are not cited. Yes, this is plagiarism, but it's not the only way to plagiarize. How about this one? We still have the same original, and then we have the student's paper. What do you notice? Hopefully you're noticing that in the student's paper, it's not exactly matchy-matchy. However, if you really read the student paper, are the same ideas represented, but just in different words? Yes. And is the same structure there as far as the idea development from idea to idea to idea? Yes, again, it is. And so this is an example that you can use to teach your students, hey, you don't have to take something exactly word for it to be considered plagiarism. Even taking ideas and putting it in your own words, that is still plagiarism if you do not cite and acknowledge your source. I've also found in recent years that sometimes students will use these scrambler websites and they'll enter in an original source, and the website's supposed to scramble it up and spit it back out in a way that plagiarism won't be detectable. You will absolutely be able to tell if a student is doing this because the end result is pretty comedic sometimes. And I think students, at least the one that I had last year, it was not even understandable parts of this paper that were used from the scrambler. The ideas didn't make sense. The word choice was off. And so the student had just copy pasted, must have been in a hurry, and she didn't even read through to double check that it made sense. So that's something that you might find as well. Okay, moving on. How about this one? Same original, but the student paper, hey, we have a quotation and a misspelling. Apologies. Should be despair. So we're acknowledging the source, right? We're acknowledging Talitha. It came from page 47. Seems to be pretty good, right? No. Okay, so look at this part. One can tell that progress and doom are the same. Both are delusional, not made of true belief. That is this part right here. If a student cites part of the author's idea, even with an in-text citation, but then goes on to paraphrase or put in their own words another part of the source, well, I'm assuming as a reader here that only this came from Talitha because the in-text citation should come at the end of where that author's ideas leave off. And so giving the in-text citation, but then putting this in their own words and still snatching from that source, that's plagiarism because they're misrepresenting this analysis after the quote. This is where my voice is, and it's not, in fact, their ideas there. All right, how about this one? This one seems to be on the up and up. We have the author here. We have a longer quote here. Could use a page number, forgot the page number, citation. Is this okay? Question mark? Let's look at this beginning part. While reading Don's novel, one can not help but wonder about its reckless ways of viewing the world. So the question here is, if we're using one loaded word from a source, can that count as plagiarism? Yes, if your thoughts are hinging on that original author's intended meaning and contextual use of that word, then that didn't come from you. You're still using an idea from the other author. Here, notice that the author's writing and they use the word reckless twice, reckless optimism and reckless despair. And so Talitha's argument hinges on that idea that optimism and despair are reckless and the connotations of being reckless, and that argument develops from there. Last but not least, how about this one? Yes, this is fine. You'll notice we've got some heavy-duty quotation and citation going on here, interspersed with things like Talitha argues, she contends, Talitha sees this dichotomy between hope and hopelessness at the heart of Jessica's internal conflict. Adding on to Talitha's dichotomy, one can also see the split between altruism and selfishness. And so what's going on here is the author, the student, is very masterfully piecing together and threading throughout, using sentence starters and using transitional phrases that give credit to Talitha. And then at the end, we see the transition springboarding from Talitha's idea to their own ideas. And it's because they represented Talitha's ideas that they're able to use that to add on and come at it from a different angle. It's not reckless optimism and reckless despair anymore. The student is also adding on that there's a split between altruism and selfishness. And so that idea of both sides of the coin, that was evident in Talitha's argument, but the student is taking that and they're applying it to totally different ideas, altruism and selfishness, and then they could go on and add in their own evidence and create their own argument from that. Okay, so hopefully those examples helped to walk you through the progression of what could technically be seen and counted as plagiarism. Most often, I will see students paraphrasing to put in their own words, but still stealing the ideas or the idea development of an argument from the author without giving credit, or taking word for word portions of a source or even another student's paper without citing that and giving credit where credit is due. Quiz time, you can ask these questions of your students. Which of the following is an example of plagiarism? Really, you should be saying an individual uses the work of another and misrepresents it as their own. As we just talked about, there are various ways of doing that, from what might be perceived as not that big of a deal to, hey, you're totally stealing this entire source that is not yours at all. Like I said, both extremes are still plagiarism technically. How about this next one? Drawing information or content from the work of another without acknowledging the source by citing reference is considered to be plagiarism in all of the following cases, except, Okay, so if something is common knowledge, then it does not need to be cited. And a good rule of thumb is, if this information is something that you see across multiple sources, it's common enough to be seen in not just this one source or this one author's argument, then you can be pretty confident in saying, okay, that's common knowledge, and not citing it. All right, which of the reasons below best describes why it's insufficient to cite sources for your work through a bibliography or works cited page alone? Because your students might say, but hey, I have a works cited page. But because citing the bibliography or works cited page alone fails to attribute the exact sources of each specific passage within the text, that's not enough, because you could have multiple sources on your works cited page, but if I, as a reader, don't know which parts of the student's paper came from which of those sources, that's still technically plagiarism because there's a gray area there that you've created. Hope that this has been helpful and you found some takeaways not only for yourself as a teacher, but also parts of this that you can use with your students to help them avoid their own cases of plagiarism. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to hit subscribe and the bell notification so that you can get even more great content like this. I'll see you next time.